On the evening of September 14, 2020, around 9 p.m., Richard Grant made a horrifying discovery. As he walked into his home office, he found his wife, Emily Grant, lying lifeless on the floor, her body cold and stiff. Emily had a scarf tightly wound around her neck, her eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. Richard's heart sank, and his hand flew to his mouth as he struggled to comprehend the scene before him. In a daze, he reached for his phone to call 911, his fingers trembling uncontrollably. The 911 operator answered quickly, and Richard's voice was barely audible as he reported the incident. "My wife, she's not breathing. I think she's dead," he stammered, his voice filled with shock and terror. As he spoke, he glanced around the room, trying to make sense of the chaos: the overturned chair, the scattered papers, the broken glass on the floor. Within minutes, paramedics arrived at the Grant residence. The sound of sirens filled the quiet, upscale neighborhood of Maplewood Estates, drawing the attention of curious neighbors who peeked out from behind their curtains. The paramedics rushed inside, their faces serious and focused. In the office, they confirmed the worst. Emily was dead. One of the paramedics gently guided Richard out of the room, while the others began to secure the scene, careful not to touch or disturb anything. The sound of Richard's anguished sobs echoed through the house as the reality of the situation began to sink in. Emily Grant, 41, was a renowned architect and co-founder of Grant & Burke Designs, an award-winning architectural firm based in New York City. She had grown up in a small town in Ohio and attended the University of Cincinnati, where she earned her degree in architecture. Emily was known for her innovative designs and her ability to blend modern aesthetics with functionality, earning her a reputation as one of the most talented architects of her generation. Richard Grant, 45, was a successful financial advisor with a distinguished career in wealth management. He had grown up in a wealthy family in Connecticut and attended Harvard University, where he earned degrees in economics and finance. After graduating, he quickly rose through the ranks of his firm, eventually becoming one of the top financial advisors in the country. Richard was known for his sharp mind, his attention to detail, and his ability to navigate the complexities of the financial world. The Grants had met at a charity gala in New York City in 2009. Emily had been captivated by Richard's intelligence and charm, while Richard admired Emily's creativity and passion for her work. Their relationship blossomed quickly, and within a year, they were married in a lavish ceremony attended by their family, friends, and the city's elite. Together, they formed a formidable partnership, supporting each other's careers and sharing a deep love for philanthropy. To the outside world, Richard and Emily Grant were the epitome of success and happiness. They lived in a beautiful home in one of New York's most exclusive neighborhoods, attended glamorous events, and traveled the world. But beneath the surface, their marriage was far from perfect. The pressures of their high-powered careers, coupled with the demands of their social lives, had taken a toll on their relationship. Over time, small cracks began to appear in their seemingly perfect facade. The police arrived promptly at the scene, led by Detective Maria Lopez and her partner, Detective James Cole. Detective Lopez was known for her meticulous attention to detail, while Detective Cole had a reputation for his keen intuition and ability to read people. They began their investigation immediately, carefully evaluating the crime scene. As Detective Lopez examined the disordered office, her expression grew grim. 2 coffee mugs, one with a faint trace of lipstick, lay on the desk next to an overturned vase of flowers. A laptop was open on the desk, its screen shattered. The scarf used as the murder weapon was still tied tightly around Emily's neck, and her face bore the marks of a violent struggle. The scene was both heartbreaking and disturbing, with no signs of forced entry, suggesting that Emily knew her attacker. The detectives noted the presence of the second coffee mug and the lipstick, indicating that Emily had not been alone in the hours leading up to her death. The autopsy would reveal more answers, but for now, the detectives were determined not to overlook any details that might explain what had happened. Detective Lopez immediately began collecting evidence, carefully taking fingerprints from various surfaces in the room and sending them to the lab for analysis. Detective Cole focused on taking detailed photographs of the scene, ensuring that every piece of evidence was documented. They found the scarf used as a murder weapon and carefully bagged it for further examination. They also collected DNA samples from under Emily's fingernails, indicating that she might have scratched her attacker in an attempt to defend herself. Outside, the forensic team arrived and began their work, meticulously processing the scene with a sense of urgency and precision. They used special lighting to search for any bodily fluids that might provide additional clues, and collected hair samples and fibers from the office and surrounding areas. Every piece of evidence was crucial, and the team knew that piecing together the events leading up to Emily's tragic death would require meticulous attention to detail. As the forensic team worked, a few curious neighbors continued to watch from behind their curtains, whispering to each other in hushed tones. The usually peaceful street was eerily quiet, with only the occasional passing car breaking the silence. The sense of unease was palpable, and the community was left to grapple with the shock and horror of the event. The following morning, September 15th, Detectives Lopez and Cole summoned Richard Grant to the police station for further questioning about Emily's murder. They had spoken to him briefly at the scene, but now needed more in-depth information. Richard was ushered into the interview room, where the detectives began their questioning, searching for any inconsistencies in his alibi or potential motives for the crime. Detectives Lopez and Cole conducted the interrogation with practiced precision, their eyes fixed on Richard as they asked him to account for his whereabouts on the night of Emily's murder. Richard claimed he had been working late at his office, finalizing reports for a major client, and provided emails and texts to support his alibi. At first, his story seemed solid, but as the questioning continued, the detectives noticed subtle inconsistencies in his demeanor. Richard's eagerness to establish his alibi seemed excessive, and his repeated insistence on his innocence, even when not directly challenged, raised suspicions. The detectives observed that Richard's hands fidgeted as he spoke, and he frequently glanced around the room, avoiding eye contact. His voice trembled slightly as he answered their questions, and he seemed overly concerned with convincing them of his innocence. Detective Lopez and Cole exchanged a knowing glance, sensing that Richard might be hiding something. They decided to investigate further, looking into his activities in more detail to verify his alibi and uncover any potential discrepancies. They also made a note to contact the staff at his office to confirm his story and see if anyone could corroborate his presence there on the night of the murder. The detectives began their investigation by reviewing security footage from Richard's office building in Manhattan, where he claimed to have been working late on the night of Emily's murder. As they dug deeper, they uncovered footage from the parking garage, which showed Richard leaving the building around 7 p.m., much earlier than he had initially claimed. This new information raised suspicions, and the detectives wondered where Richard had gone after leaving his office. Their suspicions were further heightened when they discovered that Richard had checked into a hotel under an alias later that evening. Surveillance footage from the hotel showed him entering a room around 8 p.m. and leaving just after midnight. The detectives decided to investigate further, looking into who he might have been meeting and what his connection was to Emily's murder. The detectives continued to investigate, focusing on Richard's hotel stay and the mysterious individual he had met there. As they reviewed earlier footage from the hotel lobby, they discovered that the person Richard had met was a young woman in her early 30s, with dark hair and a distinctive tattoo on her wrist. The questions remained. Who was she? What was her relationship with Richard? And could she be connected to Emily's murder? Furthermore, the detectives checked Richard's alibi and found that he had lied about his activities during the time in question. The evidence suggested that Richard had deliberately misled them about his whereabouts, raising further doubts about his involvement in the crime. The detectives decided to identify the woman from the hotel and bring her in for questioning. They traced her to a high-end escort service, where she was known by the alias Raven, whose real name was Lisa Collins, was a well-known figure in certain circles, catering to wealthy clients who sought discretion and excitement. When Lisa was brought in for questioning, she was surprisingly forthcoming. She confirmed that she had met with Richard on the night of September 14th, but she claimed that their encounter was purely business. According to Lisa, Richard had been a regular client for several months, and their meetings had always been private and consensual. She denied any involvement in Emily's murder and insisted that Richard had never mentioned his wife during their encounters. Despite Lisa's cooperation, the detectives remained suspicious. They decided to dig deeper into Richard's financial records, hoping to uncover any payments or transactions that might link him to Lisa or any other suspicious activities. As they reviewed his bank statements, they found a series of large, unaccounted-for withdrawals, which appeared to be payments to an unknown recipient. The detectives traced the payments to an offshore account registered in Lisa's name, raising further questions about her relationship with Richard. Was she telling the truth about their encounters, or was she involved in a more sinister scheme with him? As the investigation progressed, the detectives began to unravel a web of lies and deception that went far beyond a simple affair. They discovered that Richard had been embezzling money from his clients for years, funneling the funds into offshore accounts to finance his lavish lifestyle and secret affairs. Emily, who had become suspicious of her husband's activities, had confronted him about the missing money just days before her murder. The detectives also uncovered evidence that Richard had been planning to leave Emily for Lisa, hoping to start a new life with her once he had secured enough money. But when Emily threatened to expose his embezzlement and ruin him, Richard realized that his carefully constructed life was about to come crashing down. Faced with the prospect of losing everything, Richard had made a desperate decision. On the night of September 14th, he had returned home after meeting with Lisa, hoping to convince Emily to keep quiet. But the confrontation had quickly turned violent, and in a fit of rage, Richard had strangled his wife with the scarf, leaving her lifeless on the office floor. With the confession, the case against Richard was airtight. He was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, embezzlement, and fraud. The trial was swift, with the prosecution presenting overwhelming evidence of his guilt. On October 21, 2020, the court delivered its verdict. Richard was found guilty on all charges and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As the news of Richard's conviction spread, the once proud Grant family name was forever tarnished. The community, once envious of the Grants' wealth and success, now regarded them as a cautionary tale of greed, deception, and betrayal. Emily's tragic death left a void in the lives of those who had known her, and her contributions to the world of architecture were celebrated even as the details of her murder shocked and saddened those who had admired her. Richard, now stripped of everything he had once held dear, was left to spend the rest of his days in a prison cell, haunted by the memory of the woman he had betrayed and the life he had destroyed. The case of Richard and Emily Grant served as a stark reminder that even the most seemingly perfect lives can be built on a foundation of lies, and that the truth, no matter how deeply buried, will always find a way to come to light.